What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Reddit stock, ticker symbol RDDT, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day. Wednesday, April 3rd. Okay, guys, Reddit stock here today up $4.48 a share. That's plus 9.75%. The volatility in this name has been pretty wild. Today was a very big day, reclaiming an incredibly important level. But let's go through and pull out as much bias as the market gave us here today, looking at the volume profile, the psychological levels, the areas that I expect traders are going to be making moves around, the directional bias out of the chain, and finally the expected move. Let's take a look, starting with the volume profile analysis here on the 5-minute chart. Listen, by the way, leave a comment. Let me know what stock or stocks you'd like me to cover here in the future. That feedback helps out tremendously. Let's take a look. Okay, guys, so on Reddit stock here today, we had this grindy move. Now, there are a couple of moves I want to kind of focus on there, and then this peak out and fade on the day. But a very consistent upside trend day out of Reddit stock today. Now, if we look at the volume profile, okay, first of all, listen, this single outlier candle, sure, it was a lot of shares comparatively speaking, but for me, it's always tough to really assign a lot of bias on a candle like that, simply due to the fact that there's no consistency. There's no consecutive bars. We're simply dealing with one outlier. But if we look here, we clearly have some out of context volume on those green bars. Moving forward throughout the day, we see that additional pop. Again, some out of context green bars. Then we saw, kind of one, maybe two, really just that one later in the day once we hit kind of that high of day, which was a battle bar, which is going to pump up the volume a bit. But certainly here and here, we did see some pretty obvious bull side volume here in the profile today that we're not really seeing on the red bars, which I think is very interesting. Now, let's move on to those psychological and self-fulfilling prophecy levels, starting here on the 30-minute chart. Now, that 200 period moving average is just starting to populate here on the 30-minute, and that 50 period is very much so relevant. If we take a look, we reclaimed the 50 period here on the 30 today after giving it up back there, right? We reclaimed it now here for the first time in about a week, right? And that's a big deal. We reclaimed it early in the day on big volume. We got a retest and pull away. Now, the pull away was not on low volume. I would have loved to see that on very high volume, but we certainly reclaimed that 50 period here on the 30-minute here today. Now, bulls, that's a good thing to see. You also see this 50 period going from an aggressive descending trend to now flattening out. Here tomorrow, guys, if I'm a bull, I would love to see that 50 period curling upside into an aggressive ascending trend. That would be a great thing to see. Any retest, by the way, bulls, of that 50 period, I want to see a hard high volume hold of that level, meaning a bounce on anything above average in terms of volume. Bears, obviously, you guys want to reclaim that 50 period as resistance, and not only that, but ideally also return this 50 period into a descending trend here on the 30-minute is your ideal as a bear. Here on the 4-hour chart, we're not going to have any moving averages because remember, it's a recent IPO and those haven't populated yet. So there's really not a lot that we can look at on the 4-hour like we would on most other stocks that we can't look at perhaps a little bit better here on the daily. Listen, each bar here represents one day of trading, right? And today, you know what we did? We reclaimed a level that we had given up. The biggest psychological level that we have seen thus far on Reddit stock is $50 a share. And we barely reclaimed that here today. If we go to the 1 minute, we reclaimed it relatively late in the day as well. Okay, so this is kind of a first day reclaim. Bulls, the job there is not done yet, right? Ideally, here in the next day, 2 days, I want to see a hard test of 50 and boom, a high volume bounce and pull away, right? The high volume is very important. I say that constantly, but the reason I'm always saying that is because that is a big market sample size coming together and it's basically saying, hey, we agree with this bounce, this pull away, and when that influx of volume comes in, it tells us that everyone's kind of looking at that same thing, the bounce pulling away from 50 and agreeing on that. Bears, right? It's not a lost cause yet either for you guys. This was reclaimed very much so late in the day. Holding 50 as a resistance would be a beautiful thing to see if you're a bear here, and you'd ideally want that to happen now, meaning like tomorrow. So, don't get it twisted here. Tomorrow, Wednesday, is the battle of $50 a share, and that's going to be a really big deal. This thing is going to pick a side, and you're just going to want it to be your side on as much volume as possible. If it picks your side and the volume is very much so below average, which, by the way, we don't really have much of an average. It's a recent IPO. We have to look at these a little bit different, okay? But if it's on very little volume, like the lowest we've seen thus far, that's less definitive than if we're seeing an above average. Again, we've only really had 8 trading days or so. But the higher the volume, the more definitive, more quickly, that move or that decision really is. Now, let's take a quick look at expected move. The expiration that we have next is April 5th here on Reddit, okay? This expected move does not, by design, this does not have a directional bias. This is the volatility expectation, which is like the missing link once you develop your directional bias by looking at the analysis, looking at the volume profile, looking at the options bias, and then also, of course, if you're a long-term holder, the fundamentals of the company. But you always hear me say, in the short-term, psychology and technicals, which really is just psychology, always wins. The longer time frame you go out, the more fundamentals take over, okay? But the expected move being priced in by the market by close on Friday is plus or minus $5.51 a share. Now, we don't have any earnings or anything between now and then, so if we just divide that by 3 to get, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the market's telling us it expects $1.84 plus or minus of movement per day. But again, that's assuming a green streak or a 3-day red streak. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to add about 50% to that to account for a mix of green and red days, which gives us about $2.75 of movement per day in terms of expectation, which is, obviously a little more than half, though, of what we got today. But you have to consider, today was nearly a 10% day, so they're still pricing in some volatility here in Reddit, certainly. And understanding the market's volatility expectation, coupled with your directional bias, helps you be a much more effective, especially options trader. It's incredibly, if you're trading options and you don't consider the volatility expectation, you're playing a losing game. There's no way around it. That being said, let's take a look now at the options bias, the directional bias out of the chain. Listen, volume is low, so take it with a grain of salt, but we had 65,000 total contracts traded. 34,500 of those were calls, and 30,800 of those were puts. But if we look at the short-term speculators, again, guys, volume is very low. Take this with a grain of salt. But the short-term bets being placed, we're seeing a heavy put-side bias. 6,800 calls, 18,200 puts. But as you move down the delta ranges into the more mid and longer term outlooks, you start to lean call heavy. Listen, if you got value out of this video, if you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. If you're on Instagram or TikTok, follow along. I appreciate it. Also, if you enjoyed or found some good information in this video, I think you'll find probably an equal, if not more, amount of value in our free Discord. It's a relatively new server. We need some pioneers. If you're on YouTube, you can join instantly for free by clicking that link in the pinned comment. Instagram and TikTok, just go to the profile, right? Click the link in the bio, and that'll also allow you to join instantly for free. I appreciate you guys. Leave a like on the way out. It helps out tremendously, and I'll see you in the next one.